Republican Guard and insurgency were going through the convoy. They found his body, they drug him through town, they hung him up in the center of town. About 48 hours later, they got word that we were coming to get his body, and they did cut him down and buried him in a trash dump. My name is Chris Mansfield. I spent from Halloween 2000 to right around April Fool's Day 2005 in the United States Marine Corps, with the majority of my career with 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines. And yeah, if you were at HP 215 to HP 225 and that time frame, you probably met me, heard of me, drank a beer with me. I had climbed up the rank ladder, up and down it a couple of times. Highest rank out is a corporal. I grew up in the early 80s. I was a child of divorce. Both my parents kind of split time with me, so South Shore, Massachusetts, Southern New Hampshire. Moving around, kind of getting pulled by the arm in one direction to the other. Coming from a military family, was raised by my maternal grandfather, and he was a Korean War vet. My uncle, Marine Air. My mother, government contractor for the Air Force. And I didn't really so much get raised as I was trained. As I was going through life in high school, not really showing a lot of care or concern for anything besides playing football and talking to girls. I didn't really focus on my academics. I was getting ready to graduate high school in 2000 with not a lot of plans, and at the time, military service was kind of the universal fallback. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the hardest way possible, which is a recurring theme for me. I was raised in a state of being comfortable with violence. I would know that, yeah, you can score a touchdown and get that little bit of a cheer from the family, but run somebody over, send somebody ass over tea kettle, and that's the big roar. As a kid of divorce, I always found myself kind of looking to try to get validation. I always felt like I was kind of a piece in the puzzle of their argument against each other. Being in going into military service, that validation is really tangible. You get rank, you get an award, you literally get a medal and a cookie. When I was looking for something that would be a good fit to me, I took to it like water. It was just like leading a bunch of guys in the huddle or talking to a bunch of my friends planning our latest shenanigan. Take that leadership role and use a little bit of Gregorian authoritarianism, and all of a sudden you can get these guys to run up a hill, you can get them to drop off the sergeant major's daughter in the shopping cart from Signal Battalion. I was a pretty punk of a kid. I was a little shorter, a little scrappier, a little louder. My mouth got me into a lot of trouble a lot of times. Being a little guy, trying to prove I was as tough as the big guys. And I was a pretty quick-witted kid, so all of a sudden everybody's laughing at that kid who's about a foot taller than me. Eventually he's going to punch me in the face. Meeting in the bathrooms in the art wing and duking it out over various conflicts of high school and grade school nature, and I just kind of kept that theme of violence going. If I had a problem, if I could punch it in the face, it was a little less of a problem. Not a lot of healthy coping skills there. I was a pretty solid weekend warrior. Big football team, all of us drinkers. It was a determining factor. The sign of a good time would be if we had beer after the game. It got started a little bit there. Never really did the whole drink before school, but drink before school events. Oh, we're going to prom, better tie one on. And, after games, obviously, started hitting it really good. And I didn't really like pot. I liked uppers. Cocaine was a good one. I enjoyed that. I hadn't started ruining my life really to any degree, and was easy to drop all that stuff when I arrived at Paris Island and didn't have the opportunity to. And in the early 2000s, going that barracks life, those are a bunch of Marines who are seniors who didn't have any real combat, had zero combat experience, not a lot to do. Being recruited was a pretty smooth transition. I more or less, I didn't put it off, but I always found like if it wasn't super convenient to me, I was just like, oh yeah, I'll go next month. And so my recruiters started getting a little antsy, and then I started getting cold feet and reevaluated my options for college. All my friends were going, and It looked like they were setting up for a really good time. And then my recruiter finally was like, look, I will get you on a plane tonight to Parris Island. And not realizing it at the time, but I arrived on Parris Island on Halloween night. And it only got scarier from there. My recruiter didn't give me a lot of options. I mean, I scored very well, a high GT score, did really well on my ASVAB. Everybody wanted to do all these other jobs, get shipped off to learn not cybersecurity at the time, but aircraft mechanic, stuff like that. And I said, if I'm going to be a Marine, I'm not going to be a butcher, baker, candlestick maker. I want to carry around a big gun. I want to, come emerging out of the option. And I want to fight the lava monster. I want the whole experience. And went in with that open infantry contract, and I ended up with my primary job code being a 0351, Antitank Assaultman. When I showed up to Parris Island, it was, I kind of knew what to expect to a degree. Once again, reading that a pepper is spicy and eating that spicy pepper are kind of two different things. And did the whole 9 yards, getting yelled and screamed at, running off the bus, running around like a chicken on fire, trying to find my set of yellow footprints. This was still the non-digital Marine Corps, so heavy focus on uniform discipline, learning how to spit shine a boot. Some older school thinking Marines there on the island. Had my first quarterdeck smoking, maybe being there a week. From what I hear, just a different time now in basic training from that experience of getting you into that fight or flight mode and seeing how you react to it to what's going on now. I went to boot camp on Halloween. A lot of those major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all occurred for me while I was in boot camp. And nothing really of note for Thanksgiving besides the fact that, chow hall turkey and my introduction to the wonderful world of T-Rats. On New Year's Eve, the drill instructors obviously somebody was sipping on something behind the scenes. And we've got our little 92-pound fire watch. Poor kid speaks 70 words of English. The drill instructors come pouring out of the office, and the little booger just goes running up to him to report his post. Sir, good evening, sir, Ruth Ortiz. And they just mobbed him, the poor kid. And everyone just went, pretending like they were asleep. For Christmas, we all lined up along the windows, and we took our moonbeam, the good old original boot camp flashlight, and one of us would put the white insert in, one of us would put the red insert in, the other one would put the blue insert in. And our drill instructors would coordinate us. So as we're flashing these out the window, he's like, oh, good job, guys. Oh, Christmas lights. Jumping through the hoop, being a good monkey, getting the banana. I met one of my best friends who would serve throughout my career. Always ended up just by the sheer virtue of the alphabetical organization skills of the Marine Corps. Me and my buddy Jeremy Murray started off in boot camp in the same platoon, end up at SOI in the same platoon, and then end up in Victor 2-2 together at the end of SOI. So it was good to have somebody who kind of gave me a little stability. See him, he was a prior service guy, prior service Army, got booted out for faking his ID, which in the pre-September 11th military, they wouldn't look for reasons to kick you out, but it was a whole lot easier then. At SOI, I had an interesting experience because now I can go out in town and have a couple drinks. And I was dating a female Marine at the time. And we went out to good old Club 108 out there in the Jacksonville Badlands. And of course, I was running my mouth, and this gentleman hit me in the face with a beer bottle. And then his buddy hit me in the face with another beer bottle. The next day, we were having our night fire for the SMAW. And I remember having just the big, huge, beat-up eye and having to press that into the old Starlight scope for 3 seconds just so I could try to get the rocket off. It may have been a sign of things to come that perhaps me, alcohol, and violence were not such a great mix, but I didn't care. I was full of piss and vinegar. I looked pretty good in a dress blue uniform, and I was gonna, change the world. So after graduating from School of Infantry, all of a sudden, me and a bunch of my buddies were all, oh yeah, we're going to Victor 2-2. We all pile into the school bus, and we wheel in front of HP 215, and man, it looks like Animal House. Like dudes are just hanging off the decks. This is that pre-September 11th Marine Corps where those dudes didn't have a lot to do besides perfect hazing techniques and drink a lot of alcohol. And I didn't even make it. I was 50 feet away from the barracks before I'm getting grabbed up and getting my uniform physically inspected, getting told exactly how, my next couple hours in my life, the rest of my life, for all I know, is gonna go. And we got a good amount of help from those guys. And I checked into the unit on March 11th, 2001, and I remember that weekend, kind of leading up to St. Patrick's Day, and I was like, wait a second, these guys are going to be obliterated, and we're all here. Yeah, I got a good taste of that old school Marine Corps hazing there for my introduction to the fleet. Getting beat on for obviously just zero reason whatsoever. Having the audacity to possibly ask senior lance corporals or NCOs for anything. One of my really good friends who recently retired from 24 years of service earned the call sign Pooh Bear fairly early in his military career. Our NCOs put a $1 bill smeared with shit side down on the sidewalk attached to a fishing line. And there goes old Private First Class Bateman shuffling up, think he's gonna get $1 richer. So he looks both ways and goes and grabs the bill, crams it into his pocket, covered in shit. So here we are in the 24 years later, and to this day, a lot of people refer to that Marine who went on to serve 24 years as Pooh Bear. Myself personally, my smart mouth got me in trouble. I had an NCO who wasn't in the best physical condition, and I would passively aggressively remind him of those things. I just that's where my mouth started getting me in trouble. More so, just kind of followed the trend of the rest of my life. Well, Corporal, you look great today. You definitely, those small incremental runs to the fridge back and forth really burned off the calories for you. And little things like that, so I couldn't think of anything good. You couldn't eat that passive aggressive or just would slide out of my mouth like, oh, absolutely, yep, pull-ups, yeah. September 11th, 2001, we just got back from CAX, doing range 400, our first real big go somewhere, do something, and we thought at the time that would be the do-all, end-all of it. And we were on the 96, and I woke up hungover, Captain Morgan bottle clanging around on the floor, and my ex-wife had woken me up and was saying the World Trade Center's on fire. And then I snapped on the TV just in time to see the second plane hit. And I remember we all had the old Motorola StarTAC phone, like the original clamshell one. And mine just started blowing up, and they were conducting the recall of the entire 2nd Marine Division. So, everybody and their mom and their commanding officer's mom trying to get on base through 4 lines of traffic. By the time I got on base, there was already gun trucks at every intersection. I always hated being that guy, although it happened to me pretty frequently when the whole unit would be in formation and I'm running up to the formation in my civilian attire that's, lipstick on my collar and torn to shreds by the local wildlife. And I go running up, and all of a sudden seeing, the staff NCOs rushing around like we were used to seeing, senior lance corporals and NCOs rushing around, and seeing the genuine kind of like the look of being unsure. To that point, all we'd known from our staff NCOs was solidarity, command, this stoic silence. If you went up to go talk to Gunny, you're really fucked up. And, we had a lot of those old school NCOs, like our Sergeant Major was, a 50-something-year-old man. He was just down bouncing around like a half happy, crazy grandfather. But then to see him sternly looking concerned about all this activity that's going around, it was really surreal. All of a sudden, like my preconceived notion of what I was going to do in the military, like all I was really planning for was like, European sex vacations and wearing the dress blue uniform and firing off some rockets and some missiles and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, it starts dawning on me that, we're going to have to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. It's no longer just a cool thing we yell when we're bashing a sandbag with a motivated butt stroke. Like, we're gonna have to start being about that life. Things are getting real fast. A lot of guys who we previously thought were the toughest dudes on the planet, all of a sudden becoming conscientious objectors. People shuffling around from units. This was around the time still where it was a fashionable punishment for non-combat units to send their problem children to grunt units. Like this poor guy who, we'll call him a confirmed bachelor, and wasn't hiding it very well, coming from a combat camera environment, that's all he knows, to a post-September 11th Infantry Fleet Marine Force unit. Now this guy's working into a workup for the initial invasion of Iraq. That's just didn't make a lot of sense to me. A lot of guys who are the rascals of the DPAC department all of a sudden getting shipped down and being sent to die, and not die and being sent off to combat situation, but being sent to Siberia. That was a grunt unit, and I never understood that, where we had to we'd started conditioning ourselves to be about getting ready to do gangster stuff, and we're getting shipped these clowns from other units who are completely non-hack. It was just a wild time. None of us knew what to expect. We were all, everybody in our unit, nobody had been to combat before. Seeing a combat action herb in those days meant you had a certified badass walking around, and there wasn't many of those running around. And then all of a sudden now we're all geared up to it, and it's all becoming real. The training hasn't kicked in yet, but we know we have to execute. And everybody just trained a little bit harder after that, a little less bullshit, a little more concentration, so to speak. And of course, naturally, you had the people who were trying to get out of it, saying they were a conscientious objector. Oh, I only have this. I want to, start my terminal leave early. And people that we had positive perceptions of before, as the ranks started thinned down to who was going to actually deploy or not, a little bit of respect was lost for some of those guys who'd walked around like they were gonna go ahead and single-handedly wipe the Taliban off the face of the earth themselves. We were already in the workup to go on the 24th MEU as a traditional med float, which would have been that European sex vacation that I was really looking forward to when I enlisted. As workup for that now shifted roles from a traditional med float to a combat mission. Everybody's working just a little harder, doing things a little better, perfecting their craft. A lot of reliance on younger leadership corps. So at the time, I was just a regular team leader in the assault section, just taking my game to the next level, knowing which missile for which situation, or which rocket for which situation, working my armor ID so I could relay information if there was something that, your layman can see, working breaching techniques as I was starting to look about the environment of what we were facing in that theater, perfecting a, demolitions role, which was part of what 51s did as, company breachers, making sure that if something was going to go wrong, it wasn't going to be because of me or one of my guys. And, really taking it to heart. Seeing everybody have that same mentality, it was pretty reassuring. I mean, we were all going into the unknown, but we were all going to go together. We had some really great leadership. I mean, I can predominantly speak for Fox Company in 2-2, but Sergeant Major Tilley, Colonel Miller, those are some good old school Marines who knew how to keep us focused on task at hand. Gunny Hewitt from Golf Company, Gunny Newman from Fox Company. Those guys were like, Statler and Waldorf of the 1970s Marine Corps. Those dudes were old school, running around with mohawks, chain smoking Newports, doing their PFTs with their hands, handcuffed behind their back. Those are some really good guys. So it was very reassuring if they were feeling antsy about it, they weren't going to tell us directly, and we'd have a harder time looking at their cues, so to speak. But as the time started getting closer, they were like, "Oh, don't worry, it's just going to be the regular deployment, so we're just going to go on the med float." And we all knew that was a load being fed to us. So we just kind of took it upon ourselves, held each other accountable. We were in the gym, we were doing what we could do at the lowest level of leadership to ensure the survival of us and the guys around us. So the 24th MEU that led into the invasion of Iraq, the MEU that God forgot. We had gone and started off with Joint Task Force Africa, guarding the Chevalier Airfield out there by Camp Lemonnier, and lying to the French and saying it was a training mission. And I remember one of the French guys out there right around Thanksgiving of 2002, and he thought the most hilarious thing that his name was Bush. "Oh, look, it's your boss, George Bush." So being trapped in a guard tower, listening to a bunch of French snipers crack jokes, not a good way to spend a Thanksgiving. Not as fun as you would think. We were defending that airfield and doing a company rotation on it so that we could fly the Predator unmanned aircraft from that airfield to targets in Yemen and Qatar. And that's one of the first times we got to deal with the other government agency. So that's like the first time I saw a dude running around in a Panama Jack hat and a Hawaiian shirt with a plate carrier underneath it. And I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." The little things, instead of saying Al Qaeda, he's like Al Qaeda. Just that little more respect on the name because he knew it was a real threat because he had dealt with him. That and a shoeless Djiboutian military detail assisting. That was like our first kind of real deal. This is, training wheels are coming off. We all got on a bunch of CH-46s. Someone was playing Song 2 by Blur over the cranials, and next thing you know, we're in Nasiriyah, a day behind the main fight. Seeing the leftovers of, the initial skirmish, and then seeing as we got further up the road how the skirmish progressed. And, we're seeing Amtraks that are damaged. And we're just on 7-ton trucks. This is right around the time they came up with the genius idea that to save guys who are nearly being driven around on 7 tons, we were going to fill up sandbags and line sandbags on the bottom of the truck. No armor or anything on the sides, but sandbags could save our lives. 2-2 started moving up MSR Tampa. Most notably along that route is when we were in the Saratoga suit, the nuclear, biological, chemical snowsuit. People are getting hot, getting internally focused, and as Marines tend to do when they're uncomfortable, they do move that uniform regulation or uniform protocol as quickly and closely as they can to that comfort zone. So you're seeing people chopping the sleeves off of them and stuff, and it was just rugged because it's 20 degrees at night and like 110 during the day. As we're gradually moving, not necessarily going town to town, that's where we got the call about the mission to recover Sergeant Padilla's body. You can see in that picture that the Marine Corps Museum recently has remastered and refurbished. You can see us wearing the Saratoga bottoms and no Saratoga tops. At that point, we're not worried about the nuclear, biological, chemical threat. We're worried about getting dehydrating and having a heat casualty while we're lugging the body of a fallen brother out of a town where they've already demonstrated they don't mind shooting at us. The mission to recover the body of Sergeant Padilla physically started right as we were blowing through a Nasiriyah. A wing support unit or part of some manner of first service support group element was moving through a town, and they were ambushed. During the firefight, accountability was lost. Republican Guard and insurgency were going through the convoy. They found his body. They drug him through town. They hung him up in the center of town. About 48 hours later, they got word that we were coming to get his body, and they did cut him down and buried him in a trash dump right on the outskirts of town. And I was in the perimeter security when Lance Corporal Chad Conroy dug up his hand and arm. They yelled that we found him. And the whole line, just like as anybody who's ever stood in a perimeter defense, once that word starts traveling the line, it can make the day go really good or really bad. And knowing that we found his body was a really reassuring thing, lended a lot of credence to what we're doing. We humped the body out of town. I took my turn carrying it. It was a really humbling experience, and it really made what we were doing not just real, but bring credence to that esprit de corps that we didn't know this guy. We didn't even meet the people who knew this guy until 2 years ago, where we had the anniversary. Last year when we had the anniversary, and I got to meet these Marines who shared time with Sergeant Padilla, hear their side of the story, and didn't realize, never put myself in that place that they had, where they all felt awful and harbored these huge amounts of survivor's guilt. And if we had been allowed to go get him, maybe we would have found him alive. And seeing that trauma from their perspective, it was really eye-opening. The first day in Ashatra, they were pretty resistant to deal with us. They took a couple pot shots at our feeler units on the outside. I responded by getting my gun team online, and we were supposed to be shooting that SMAW at a SUV with some insurgents hiding behind it, but the rocket missed and went over the SUV and into collateral damage land. We had a couple other rocket engagements on that end. Major Neil was big on us creating that show of force. That first day, the firefight didn't last long, but when all was said and done, we installed a little parking lot on the west side of town. The next day, we kind of got there earlier, and before they were up and awake to greet us, before the Muezzinin started singing over the loudspeakers, we were in the town gathering information. Our commanding officer, Major Neil, as we found ourselves in the hospital, was essentially getting information by any means possible through the interpreter from the staff of the hospital, so we could kind of expedite finding Sergeant Padilla's body. Firearms may have been drawn. Somebody may have lost control of their bowels, but we got directions to where we were going. I remember as we were getting the body loaded up into the body bag, washing feeling of relief that we all kind of collectively shared without saying anything. We were literally doing something, putting our lives in danger to safely bring home the body of a fallen brother. And the gravity of that didn't really hit me at the time, but it's something that has resonated in my life and almost everything I do. That one man's love for another man that he never, ever met while he was alive. The only words I ever said to the guy is, "Damn, bro, you're heavy." And that was just me using humor as an unhealthy coping mechanism and repelling myself getting internalized carrying this big, heavy dude. After the mission to recover Sergeant Padilla's body, we continued to advance north. Pit stops along the way in El Rifa, Four Corners, which is a fairly popular place. One of the many times I misappropriated U.S. government property for my own selfish hilarity. We just started getting handed out the PAS 13s. We had one at Four Corners and all the gun positions, the machine gunners would have them set up and kind of over staring. We had one of our guys out there, thermal image that you see through that ancient PAS 13, you get some pretty good resolution. This guy's under his poncho liner, just giving his body, treating himself like an amusement park. And we got on the radio, we're like, "What are you guys doing over there?" Just in proof in time that, there is no Marine who's too busy to masturbate. The best form of self-improvement, I guess we're taught. And we continued moving north. We got all the way up to El Kut, parked it at the university, hung out there, a bunch of burn pits, and waited to get the word to go finish the job, and that word never came. And before we knew it, we were traveling north past Baghdad, getting up to LZ Scorpion, getting on birds with no seats, and boom, out of theater. There was no climactic, battle or, something else to really validate us. They just kind of said, okay, you guys are done. So after 9 months, 23 days, the MEU that got for Riyadh, Special Operations Capable, went home. I remember there was a lot of delusions of grandeur about our return home, where like a group of us were supposed to say, "Good morning, America." All these wonderful, great events were going to come. Bands were supposed to come and play. And in reality, we just all got on the frogs and just landed on the Peter Ross parade deck, and that was our grand return. Beat, sweaty. I remember getting off the bird, and all I wanted was a beer. I didn't want to meet my new daughter. I didn't want to hug or kiss the woman I was married to. I wanted a beer. I hadn't had a beer in, at that point, like 4 or 5 months. I wanted a beer, and I wanted a whiskey, and a cheeseburger, and then loving my family. And I kind of sharply remember that, like getting back to the barracks, and I was so relieved that we had beer. And instead of sitting and talking with my family and the people who I hadn't seen, I sat there around the keg with my dudes talking about everything we just done. So not a monstrous red flag, but just a little one. A lot of people said that I had changed. I had gone from the really happy-go-lucky guy, and I wasn't very positively received home by any of my family members. I remember, like, my grandmother. If you know anybody who's like a little scrappy Irish guy, rest assured he loves his grandmother. My grandmother was the only person in my family who taught me just natural, unconditional love. She was the one who taught me everything I knew about how to be kind to people, how to be nice to people. And I remember like looking her right in the eyes, and she just goes, "Oh, Christopher, you've changed. Something's wrong with you." And it was like the first time I seen the woman since I got back, and I was looking for, comfort, that, affection. And that's how she said, and I never realized at that time what had actually happened to me and what changed about me. And it just would take me the next 20 years to kind of fully process everything. Because as a military guy, we're taught, your emotions are secondary, your feelings don't matter. Mission accomplishment one, troop welfare second. And in that situation, you absolutely need to get the mission done. But when we manufacture that defense mechanism so ingrained that we are not in that environment anymore, and we're still applying that defense mode to be reactive, to be in fight or flight, and we're applying that when the situation doesn't, it becomes tough to become a sustainable lifestyle. And that's where I really started self-medicating. My ex-wife caught it, and she's like, "I think you're becoming an alcoholic." I said, "I'm not hurting anybody." I wanted that instantaneous change of gear in my mind. Stop thinking about, sights, smells, things you've seen. This is how you quickly change gears to, "I'm happy, I'm okay, this is okay, life is all right." It's just like ringing Pavlov's dog, ringing the bell. And so every time I would have a negative thought or a negative memory, I would artificially try to create some dopamine and just drink it. I'd been on Charlie Liberty essentially since I was like 13 years old. I mean, I am perpetual libero risk. I will take my pants off. I will pee in places I'm not supposed to. So I never really got in any big trouble drinking in the Marine Corps. Luckily, we had a lot of those old school staff NCOs, and not saying they were enabling me, but they were pretty cool with the boys will be boys type of thing for a while. Like, "Oh, who's that throwing somebody off the third deck, 90 mile an hour taped in between 2 mattresses?" "Oh, Mansfield, yeah, he's a rascal, I guess." Meanwhile, I'm sitting there pissing off the third deck after I've just thrown a boot off of it and funneling beers from the second floor to the first floor, and just essentially becoming, turning our barracks into Animal House. And I was satisfied to live that life because it was okay for me to drink as like I was drinking if I was having fun doing it. Putting on the Barracks Intercontinental Championship match between myself and another Marine, not even acknowledging any of the bad times or any of the things festering inside our head, but creating new memories. That was a big thing for a lot of units, not just ours. Guys coming back from that initial invasion, guys coming back from Fallujah campaign. You got used to trying to flip that happy switch. And that's when you flick that happy switch instead of dealing with stuff, the sustainability of your lifestyle suffers. Your quality of life suffers. Particularly in that time, there was no real good way to seek any mental help while in active duty. If you go see a Navy psychiatrist, your career is over. Not just over, they're gonna ship you off to some manner of Siberia and let you run your time out there. So a lot of guys are running around with these undiagnosed mental health problems. Misbehavior is kind of spiked up in the unit, so they crack down. We're starting to get some junior Marines in. We're getting our first boot trumps, and their first memory is usually of me bumbling up to them in green, a set of silkies, a bottle in my hand, telling them that the rest of their life's over, because that's all I knew from walking up to our barracks looking like Delta House. And we hadn't outgrown that. We weren't planning on outgrowing that. We just behaved like that, being a part of that vicious cycle still. And now we're all, drinking is not encouraged in the Marine Corps. There are Marine Corps orders about how and when to drink, particularly in like the, a dress night or any sort of military ceremonial sense. At a Marine Corps barracks with minimal attendance, you have a bunch of not just, mentally ill members of the gun club, but you have them just cavemanning Lord of the Flies style. So naturally, they're all going to drink. That's what makes our situation okay. We're seeking that external thing that makes our surroundings acceptable to us. And once again, when you're a 21-year-old kid, it's not a bad thing. But if you're keeping and holding on to that outmoded defense mechanism and doing that stuff when you're 40, that's addiction. And I never got that memo. My concept of moderation was never great to begin with. I drank every day after that first deployment. Got out of the Marine Corps, not on the best of terms, but I was pissy, resentful to my command. They were pissy and resentful to me, so went on terminal leave and said, screw it, I'm gonna go up to the University of New Hampshire and party there, and it just kept going. I never stopped being a teenager. I just would drink and drink and drink, and I'd have like the little people would come up to me, or I'd be too drunk to go to work or whatever. I was working at I was a bartender at the time. I didn't have to pass a field sobriety test to sling drinks. The activity was to make me feel better about the things that I had done, the guilt, fear, and shame I had, where if I had done this, I could have mystically prevented a fatality in combat. And I took all that stuff so hard. Like every time I set out on a patrol, I had made peace with myself that I wasn't gonna come back. I wanted to be that badass who goes out and sacrifices himself for the squad just so I can get that extra little validation for it. A good task, but a terrible motive. When you're tuned up that high and you try to go to zero, trying to be in the civilian life, Anthony Swafford's got that quote, no matter what a man does, his hands always remember the rifle. It speaks credence to, what happens to us when, even if we're not in combat anymore and we're still in service, but then what happens when we're out of service? We now have this big gap in ourselves of task and purpose that a lot of us never find, an equal to. In 2005, SEPS was not necessarily the in-depth program it is today. We basically got a 3-day class teaching us how to try to budget with a $40,000 income. And more or less, it was just the advertisement to re-enlist. Actually, one of the guys who had enlisted with me on the buddy system ended up getting cold feet about getting out and signed up immediately after the first day of SEPS class, went in, re-enlisted. I just went home. Went home, gave mom a kiss on the cheek, went up to party up at the University of New Hampshire. A lot of my friends were still there. A lot of guys go to school for 7 years and don't become doctors, I guess. I've surrounded myself yet again in a hard partying environment where the way I was drinking and using drugs didn't stand out to anybody, wasn't a problem because everybody else was doing it. Didn't take school very seriously, drank a 30 rack of Keystone Lights every single day, wake up in strange places and black out frequently and wake up in jail, just start racking up the drunken disorderlies. Right around that time, my mom was getting sick, so I decided to move back home, help out there the best of my ability. During that whole time, just never addressing a single issue. When you're raised in that stoic military fashion, and your feelings aren't super important, you never process them. You just suppress them. And, I was still self-medicating, a lot of survivor's guilt, tons of the woulda, shoulda, couldas. If I had acted differently, would something have changed? And right around that early time, we started getting words that guys weren't doing so well. We started losing guys, to their mental health issues, to the demons, and just started happening frequently. Guys from every single company, all these, hard-o grunts. You're just hearing stories. Oh, did you hear about so-and-so? No, did you hear about so-and-so? We're not really going to reunions. We're just going to funerals. And actually at those funerals, the first thing we do is, we drink to honor the memory of so-and-so. I started getting real close to having one of those get-togethers for me. Went through the VA healthcare system, called the Veterans Crisis Line once, and ended up getting my ass handed to me by 3 cops. Start of the veterans mental health movement for me started off with that. Well, I'm not going to call this again. I'm not going to try to get myself healthy. So for the next, 5 years, I was just happy being sick, being crazy. When I called that veterans helpline, instead of sending an ambulance and a mental health responder, they sent all those things, but the police have to safe scene just like any other law enforcement call. Me with 15 drinks in me and, maybe a little Coke. He doesn't want to talk. He doesn't want to try to honestly get what's off his chest. He wants to talk shit to these police officers who are talking shit to him. All of a sudden, these cops coming at me with a posture of violence. Yeah, I'm not going to be up to talk to my feelings. I'm gonna meet the energy these guys are putting out, and I'll never, ever talk about an LEO not being able to defend himself. I was just a drunk idiot, and I really wasn't ready to get any sort of help. I just wanted to be angry and wanted everybody else to know about it. I start going to the VA. I start going to support groups, and I don't handle that very well. In my experience, a lot of those military support groups, there's always an asshole, in this case the asshole is me, who turns it into a dick measuring contest. And while I'm getting in a pissing contest with the guys with no combat MOSs, I'm not helping myself. I'm just showing everybody how sick I really am. And when they give you the substance abuse test questions, modifying that to be what I drank in a day was what I drank in a week. And, I wasn't being honest. I wanted help, but I wasn't really ready to work for it. So all I did was I kept drinking. I kept medicating. I kept everything in. And that lifestyle became less and less sustainable. I started having big breakdowns, small breakdowns, and then those breakdowns started increasing in frequency. The year I turned 40, I had my first panic attack. I thought I was having a heart attack. Sitting at my desk, pain shooting down my left arm, having problems breathing. Thought I was having a heart attack. But it's not a problem that, 15 to 20 drinks I'm drinking over the course of a 9 to 5 aren't the problem. And I just never looked at it that way. It always was something else. Oh, it's because I have PTSD. Oh, it's because I have an anxiety disorder. It's because I'm depressed. It was everything everything else, it was everybody else's fault. It wasn't my fault. I'm not drinking too much. You people are making me drink too much. If you had my life, you'd drink too. Those little catchphrases became a really commonplace way for me to justify what I was doing to myself. And it just kept going on and on like that. You know, sometimes around my early 30s, I started showing the physical signs of alcoholism, shaking hands, sweating, not being able to sleep effectively, moving all the way up to when I get to my early 40s, I'm waking up in withdrawal. I can't do anything in my day unless I start putting alcohol into my body so I can walk. You know, over the course of the day, doing the insanity of making sure I'm driving by the right convenience store that's going to have the right. It can't be a 5.5% alcohol. It's got to be one of those 8% alcohols, because otherwise, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. And all that time, I never even start to think it's a mental health thing. And if it is, it's not my fault. Leading up to now, we first had the anniversary of the passing of Sergeant Padilla and the mission to recover his body. So first time Marines from Fox Company 2-2 meeting those support element Marines and celebrating the life of Sergeant Padilla, talking about our mission experience. That kind of kicks up a little bit mud. I don't really acknowledge it as a mental breaking point. About a month later, for the retirement of Pooh Bear, one of our buddies who stayed in his full 24 and change, he's retiring down in 4th Marines in New Orleans. And on the last day, you know, we're talking about, hey, you know, you got some of the original, all you original guys together. Why don't you, you know, put your arms around your original gun teams? And I go and I put my arm around the guys, and they hand me a picture. My original gunner was killed in a botched drug deal in Cleveland in 2012. I'm sitting there holding that picture, and I break down on the inside. My depression starts really putting a stranglehold on me. You know, I don't say much the rest of that trip. Better believe I drink $80 every stop on the way home. You know, airport bars, still numbing. Don't want to face anything. I have the health problems that are going on. I have the clear signs of alcoholism. I have blood tests that are showing signs of long-term health problems setting in. I'm in the midst of this deep depression. I can't get out of bed. And I finally started feeling like I felt those times where I was getting ready to self-check out. I was getting ready to let my demons win. And I couldn't let myself do it that time. And I was watching Netflix. Hadn't moved out of my bed, hadn't showered in like 4 or 5 days, and just had the Netflix rolling through on complete darkness. And an episode of Seinfeld came on the opposite. It's the episode where George does the exact opposite of everything he'd done in life. And mysteriously, his life gets better. That's my moment of clarity that led me to start getting better myself. That stupid episode of Seinfeld randomly popping up on my Netflix, things you may like. I went into a treatment center. I started treating my mental health and my substance use as interwoven factors. I started going to see a therapist. I get rid of those things like comparing my experiences to others to make myself feel superior. My therapist looks at me one day and says, "You're a pretty smart guy, right, Chris? You're a really smart guy. A decorated military guy, big thinker, I can see that out of you. Well, if you're so fucking smart, why are you treating your depression with a depressant? If you have this big, bad anxiety disorder that prevents you from living a normal life, why do you take a drug that gives you anxiety?" And for the first time, I really started putting together that I didn't know what was best for me. I was so sick that I thought I was healthy. And I was doing this to myself. I started taking responsibility for my own personal health. With one of our Marines who passed away, Major Timothy Bairstow, buried out in Arlington Cemetery. At his services, one of my really dearest friends in the Marine Corps, Sergeant Mick McCotter, and I were sharing a hotel room in DC, and I remember being blacked out drunk, fading in and out of consciousness. And I remember my one statement to him. I asked him, Mick, what happens one of these days when I wake up and I think I can't go on? You guys are all gonna be here hanging out, talking about me? And he just looked at me and, alluded that we don't know when our time's up, and it behooves us not necessarily to go out and look for that time to end. And as I started realizing exactly how much mental health, emotional stuff that I had suppressed through the years, I started being able to recognize things about myself. Recognizing that my earliest memories became my core beliefs that I built my life around. Realizing that being in fight or flight mode all the time is a bad thing. Human brain's not meant to be, in fight or flight mode for more than 2 to 5 minutes at a time. And I spent years of my life in fight or flight mode. I started dealing with things in my past that affect my future, not because I can change the past, but if I don't feel those feelings and learn that lesson, then that negative experience was just pain without growth. I start accepting responsibility for my own mental health. I start putting my gas mask on first. A lot of guys, as they start their process to try to get healthy, they put it off because they've got to, I got to work 3 jobs to take care of the kids. I got to do this, I got to do that. There's all these excuses as to why they can't try to improve their lives. Well, anything that you put above you getting better, you're going to lose anyway. So by putting yourself first, by putting your gas mask on first, you can now be the best possible you for everything else in your life. And it took me 42 years to figure that out. I started addressing my individual faults. I managed my expectations of others. As Marines in particular, we get mad at the rest of the world because they don't do everything we want them to do the way we wanted to do it. We can't treat these civilians like Marines. We got to manage our expectations. No kidding, they can't do stuff like a Marine can. They're not Marines. Your kids running around cleaning your house won't do it to a perfect military standard because they're not in the military. I started doing that with myself and applying all those principles to every single one of my affairs. I radically accepted it. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. Just because something's happening in the world and that doesn't make me happy doesn't mean it's my responsibility to interject and change it, possibly for the worst. I started realizing the things I control and the things I can't control. All I can control are my reactions and my feelings. I can't make somebody else feel the way I want them to feel. We spend all that time exercising those unhealthy habits and we drive ourselves insane. We're behind almost every single one of our problems. Is if we see the role we play in it, it makes it a lot easier. As I started learning these things about myself, addressing my mental health with a serious, honest, open-minded view, my life started getting better. I don't drink anymore. It's been 500 days since I've needed to drink, since I needed to pick up a drug. I don't have that feeling anymore. And once I started getting clear-headed, I became that better person. Dealing with mental health and substance abuse issues is the only illness that you will end up better for doing. Once you treat yourself appropriately and go into that recovery process, any other illness, you break your leg, your bones may not set properly, that leg still has impact to it. You may walk with a limp. If you have a mental health issue, a substance abuse issue, and you can manage it, arrest it, overcome it, you end up as a better person on the other end of it. Now I can honestly communicate with people. I can tell those people how I feel and listen to how they feel. And along the way, that task and purpose that we all search for when we leave the service, I found in helping my fellow veterans, helping my fellow drug addicts, helping my fellow alcoholics. I never had that task and purpose, and I was always looking for it. And it's not me, getting a squad rush or a gun drill done. It's helping my fellow man. All the time I was looking for validation. I didn't need validation. I just needed to do something. I wanted to do well when I should have been looking to do good. And all those things are why I'm alive today. Why that I feel that I can go out and help just one person, tell that one person that one thing they need to hear so that it can save their life or start them on the journey of trying to get healthy. You know, we're Marines. We don't talk about how we feel. We're tough guys. We're so tough. Deal with ourselves. That's the biggest enemy we got. If you can't deal with yourself in an honest manner and see where you can improve in that, and you think you're just the do-all, end-all, it's a big ask. It's a bold statement. I work as a resident instructor at the Farnham Center, Manchester, New Hampshire. We deal with a multitude of people with substance abuse, mental health issues. We're connected with our Veterans Now program, which will take veterans who are suffering under the challenges of substance abuse, homelessness, helping them on the path to doing the right things and making sure they understand those things that they've earned and how can they apply, how those can help their lives. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd be in charge of 20 drug addicts, I think I'd still be working in kitchens. Now I can positively impact those people who are dealing with mental health issues, substance abuse issues. When it's one of my brothers or sisters in arms, I can use that as a springboard to relate to them more and teach them that it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to not be okay. You know, all those things that we learn in the military are so contrary to mental health. And then we wonder why people get out of the military and they don't behave like a normal member of society. They can't. They've been out of it for so long. And by teaching yourself how to recognize those outmoded defense mechanisms, those things that you are so deeply ingrained in you that if you need this skill set to survive, when you really don't. You're dedicating all that energy to be vigilant in an unhealthy manner. Time and energy are finite. And if you're wasting your time and you're wasting your energy on that, how well are you really living? It's not just, adding days to your life, it's adding life to your days. It's a big recovery cliche, but it's true. I never drive to work thinking, oh God, I'm going to work. I'm like, I have the opportunity to go to work and change someone's life for the better. I went through my military career trying to lead guys and to make sure they got home okay. My oath didn't have an expiration date. Now I have that chance again to save lives, take care of my brothers and sisters in arms. And it's the most rewarding part of my life. Marines of 2-2, we all know that we just lost a good friend and brother, Sergeant Clark. First one of us to go for burn pits, please. Go check out Save the Smosh hashtag. And that can direct you to the Recon Sniper Foundation. They're accepting donations so we can stay ahead of this burn thing and hopefully not lose anybody else.